There is a mountain in Bolivia that is, by many accounts, the deadliest mine in the history of the world. It made the men who owned it the richest empire on Earth, and it is still swallowing miners alive this year, in 2026, right now, as you watch this. So how is it that a mountain everyone knows is a death sentence still sends thousands of men climbing into it every single morning? This is Cerro Rico. In Spanish, the name means the rich hill, but the people who work it have another name for it, the mountain that eats men. It stands above the Bolivian city of Potosí at 13,343 feet, over 4,000 meters, one of the highest cities on the face of the planet. The air is thin. The climate is nearly a desert. Nothing about this place says a great city should exist here. And yet, for a brief, blinding moment in history, Potosí was one of the largest and wealthiest cities in the entire world, bigger than London, bigger than Paris. It existed for one reason, and one reason only. Inside that mountain was a vein of silver unlike anything humanity had ever found. To pull it out, the empire that owned it would feed the mountain a river of human beings that has not stopped flowing in almost 500 years. This is the story of the deadliest mine in history, by far, and the men it is still eating today. The discovery. The legend says it began with a shepherd. In 1545, a local man named Diego Hualpa was out on the mountain after a lost llama when night fell and the cold came down hard. He built a fire to survive it. And as the flames heated the ground beneath him, a thin, bright thread began to run out of the earth and pool at his feet. It was pure silver, melting straight out of the rock. Within weeks, the Spanish knew. Within a year, the mountain had a mining camp at its base. Within a few decades, that camp was a city of well over 100,000 people, and the phrase Vale un Potosí, worth a Potosí, had entered the Spanish language as the highest price anything could be worth. The silver that came out of this single mountain would flood the world. It bankrolled the Spanish Empire's wars across Europe. It sailed to Asia and rewired global trade. Historians have argued seriously that the modern world economy was born inside this hill. But an empire does not carve a mountain open with its own hands. It needs bodies, and it found them. The mita. The Spanish revived an old Incan labor system and twisted it into something monstrous. They called it the mita. Under the mita, indigenous communities across the Andes were legally required to send a share of their men to Potosí, 1 in every 7 adult males, to work the mine. These men were marched hundreds of miles to get there, sometimes with their entire families following behind, because many of them understood they were not coming back. Once inside, a mita worker was expected to stay underground for the length of his shift with almost no return to the surface, descending on crude notch-log ladders, thousands of feet down, into heat and darkness and air that was slowly poisoning him. They carried the ore out on their own backs, up those same ladders, load after load, in the dark. The wages were below what it cost to survive. And when a community's men were used up, the mita simply demanded more. In 1550, only a few years after the silver was found, a Dominican friar named Domingo de Santo Tomás wrote to the Spanish crown to describe what he had seen. He called Potosí, and I am quoting him, a mouth of hell into which a great mass of people enter every year and are sacrificed to the greed of the Spaniards. A mouth of hell. That was not a poet exaggerating from across an ocean. That was an eyewitness, writing it down 5 centuries ago. The flinch, what the mountain did to a body. And here is the part that is hard to sit with. The mine did not usually kill quickly. It killed slowly from the inside. The dust in those tunnels is full of fine silica, and breathing it year after year scars the lungs into stone, a disease called silicosis that in that era had a nickname in Potosí, mal de mina, the mine sickness. Men walked into that mountain strong and walked out, if they walked out at all, as coughing skeletons who drowned in their own hardened lungs. And then, in 1572, it got worse. The Spanish introduced a new way to extract silver from lower-grade ore using mercury, the patio process. Workers spread crushed ore across open courtyards and mixed it with liquid mercury using their bare feet, breathing the fumes day after day. Mercury is a neurotoxin. It destroys the nervous system, the kidneys, the mind. The men who worked the mercury were said to tremble, to lose their teeth, to lose themselves. Between the dust, the mercury, the cave-ins, the cold, and the pneumonia that came from moving between the mountain's furnace heat and the freezing thin air outside. The mountain had 100 different ways to eat a man, and it used all of them. The count. So how many died? This is where I have to be honest with you, because the truth is disputed, and the disputed number is part of the horror. You will hear one figure repeated everywhere: 8 million dead. It appears in books, in documentaries, carved into the reputation of this mountain. But serious historians push back on it. Many argue that the 8 million figure actually counts deaths across the entire viceroyalty of Peru over centuries, a whole colonial world, not this one hill. Their estimates for Cerro Rico itself range from the hundreds of thousands into the millions. And here is the thing. Even the most careful, most conservative, most skeptical historian is still describing one of the deadliest workplaces in the history of the human species. When the argument is whether a mountain killed hundreds of thousands or millions, there is no version of the answer that is not a catastrophe. The Spanish brought in enslaved Africans as well, when the indigenous population began to collapse, and the mountain ate them too. It did not care where the bodies came from. ELTO. Now we come to the strangest part of this story, and the part that tells you everything about what it feels like to work inside that mountain. The miners are Catholic. On the surface, they pray to God. But God, they say, does not come underground. Below the surface, in the tunnels, there is a different ruler, and they have built him. At the mouth of nearly every shaft in Cerro Rico sits a statue, a horned figure, red, with glowing eyes, sometimes grinning, often grotesque. They call him El Tío, the uncle. He is, in every way that matters, the devil, and the miners do not fear him so much as they bargain with him. They believe the mountain and everything of value inside it belongs to El Tío, and that to take his silver and to survive his tunnels, you must keep him fed. So on Tuesdays and Fridays, the miners come to him with offerings. They lay coca leaves in his lap. They light cigarettes and place them in his mouth. They pour pure grain alcohol, 96%, over the ground at his feet, and they drink it too. The scholars who study this see something devastating in it. El Tío's demands, constant tribute, impossible quotas, your body in exchange for survival, are the exact demands the mita made of these men's ancestors 5 centuries ago. They didn't invent a devil out of superstition. They built a monument to the system that has been consuming them since 1545, and every Tuesday they feed it, because the alternative is to go into the dark with nothing on your side at all. The mountain today. You might assume all of this is history. It is not. Cerro Rico is still a working mine. Roughly 15,000 miners still go into it every day, many of them in cooperatives, using tools that would be familiar to a worker from 200 years ago. Carts pushed by hand. Shafts too low to stand up in. Little ventilation, little lighting, and almost no safety regulation of the kind you would recognize. Potosí is famously the only place on Earth where an ordinary person can walk into a shop and legally buy sticks of dynamite, because the miners buy their own explosives. Silicosis has not gone anywhere. The life expectancy for a man who works this mountain is estimated to be as low as 40 years. Some estimates put the death toll even now at around 300 men every single year. And there is a final, grim irony hanging over all of it. After 5 centuries of being hollowed out, the mountain itself is dying, riddled with so many tunnels that it is sinking and cracking at the summit, at genuine risk of collapse. The men are still inside a mountain that everyone knows could come down. And still, every morning, they climb. The truth. So let's separate what is certain from what is legend. The shepherd and his campfire, almost certainly a myth, a tidy origin story the Spanish like to tell. But strip away that legend, and every convenient exaggeration built up around this place, and what remains is not softer. It is harder. The silver was real, and it was staggering, enough to change the whole planet's economy. The mita was real, and it was a legal machine for turning human beings into metal. The mercury, the silicosis, the collapse of entire Andean communities. All real, all documented, all sitting inside a UNESCO World Heritage Site you can visit today. And the miners still inside, still praying to a devil they built with their own hands, that is not history. That is happening while you breathe. Your verdict. Which brings us to the question I can't answer for you. The silver from this one mountain helped build the modern world, the trade routes, the coins, the economy we all still live inside. Every one of us, in some small way, is standing on wealth that came out of Cerro Rico. So here is the question that divides people right down the middle. If you believe the world we live in was worth what this mountain cost, that this is simply the terrible price of the progress that made everything else possible, drop a red circle in the comments. If you believe nothing, no economy, no empire, no modern world could ever be worth what happened inside that mountain, drop a white circle. And then, before you go, one last thought to sit with. The men are still in there. Right now, today. So maybe the real question isn't whether the mountain's price was worth paying 500 years ago. Maybe it's this. It is still being paid, this very morning, and most of us never even knew the mountain's name. Which is worse.